Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of My Name is Dad. I am your host, Brandon Benson, and I am glad to be back. I took just a little break. As I mentioned before in some of my previous episodes, that I'm doing this podcast not for you. I'm doing it for myself. There is no schedule. There's no contract that I have to put out an episode every week. I put out an episode whenever I want to. If I want to put out 2 in a week, then I'll put out 2 in a week. If I want to wait 2 weeks to put out an episode, then that's what I'm going to do. You're just going to have to wait for it. But I do have a little bit of good news. We're coming up on Memorial Day weekend, and I'm really excited for it. Now, as I mentioned before, that I've been seeing a therapist weekly, and this last week, my therapist was like, I don't think I need to see you every week. So I have graduated to every other week or once a month, whatever it's going to be. So I am feeling good, feeling confident, and very much on a good, stable path. And it feels great. I do feel really, really good. And I enjoy doing the podcast. I just had it we were selling our old house and had a bunch of stuff coming up, and I had the kids. When I have the kids there, it's hard to record because they're playing video games and they want food all the time. So I record when I can, or when I feel like it, or when I feel like, oh yeah, I remember these stories, and I'm gonna speak into the mic and tell everybody. So that's what's going on with the schedule and the podcast. So let's talk about the sponsor, which is myself, which is Point B Grading and Turfcraft Maintenance LLC. I do a lot of I'm a landscape contractor, licensed and bonded. And I've been doing a lot of house pads and been doing some top dressing, where I take my tractor and I level out the sand straight up over your grass. So your natural grass. I just did a soccer field where they had 100 tons of sand, and I spread it out all over the field and made it nice and level for them. It came out really, really nice. I also do a lot of laser grading. So again, I've been doing a lot of house pads, and I do a lot of baseball infields and softball infields. So if you got something like that you want to get done, go ahead and look us up at pointbgrading.com or send me an email, pointbgrading@gmail.com. All right, let's move on. I forget what episode of this Who I Am series we're on, but I think where we left off, I'm working at the Metro 4. Mrs. White gave me a throw up kiss and threw up all over my bed, but I have a new roommate, 2 new roommates, and we are now renting a house, 3-bedroom house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, in Hanford, California. And this was, again, this was my friend Lauren's idea. He wanted this house. He's like, the apartment sucks. Let's get a house. So, okay, we got a house. So I'm working at the Metro 4. I'm probably an assistant manager at this point. I don't know if I'm quite the general manager. At some point I do become the general manager. But I think I'm the assistant manager. And so we moved to this house in Hanford, and it was like, man, I can't remember how much it was. I think it was like $950 a month. Okay. And I tell the guys, all right, well, let's all do $300. I said, but I'll take the master bedroom and I'll pay the extra $50. Right. And they're like, okay, yeah, that's totally fine. So I pay $350 and everyone else pay $300 a month. And that was our rent. But when we moved into the house, it was like, well, we got to have like a welcoming party, don't we? Yes, we do. So we decided we were going to go full Animal House on this one, and we were going to have a toga party to start this for the welcoming party for this house. And quite honestly, this is like, I just got to tell you, this is like the greatest party I've ever been to, that I've ever been a part of, this toga party. So I had a bunch of people from the Metro 4 came, and just some friends, and everyone invited friends. And I think it was so successful because, number one, everyone was dressed up. Okay. We had togas, me and my friends who lived there. So we decided, and we were like, okay, everyone's going to probably wear a white sheet, right? So we're like, well, let's wear black sheets. So that way it was like, if anyone's like, oh, who lives here or whose house is this? Just say, find someone in a black sheet. Because we were like, no one's probably going to wear that. So we just went and bought some black sheets and made our togas. But we had so many people show up in togas. It was awesome. I think we even had a keg. It had a pretty cool backyard. It was like all cement and had big trees in the back. And I think just because we were so new to this house and so new to the neighborhood that we just caught everyone off guard about having this party. So no one called the cops. It was like an amazing, everyone had fun. We had loud music. all the women were dressed super nice, almost like a Halloween party type of vibe, but it was toga party. It was so awesome. All the ladies were all dressed, very scantily and everything. I remember we even had some guy, I don't remember who he was, a friend of somebody's. He came and his toga was bubble wrap. So it was basically see-through, but it was bubble wrap. That was pretty funny. I do remember that. It was a great time. I mean, it was like one of those parties. No one bothered us. A lot of people came. Everyone had fun. It was definitely one of those parties that goes down in history. Like, everyone got drunk, everyone got laid, everyone had a good time. The toga, I don't remember what year this was, but yeah, that toga party was the first and epic one, that's for sure. So I'm working at the Metro 4, and again, at some point, I become the general manager. And again, and at this point, so for the toga party, when I moved to the house in Hanford, let me back up just here a second, that me and Mrs. White had broken up. We had gotten together, we were dating and broken up like 3 or 4 times before we ended up getting married. And at this point, we were definitely not together. We were broken up. She was going to school at Fresno State. I was in Hanford working at the Metro 4. No real, legitimate career path at this point. But again, at some point, I was promoted to the general manager. The general manager of the Metro 4, he ended up getting a job somewhere else, and he recommended me to be the general manager, so they just hired me on. And then at the time, I remember I was making, and again, it was every time I was like, well, maybe I'll go get another job or do something else. It was like, oh, we want to promote you and give you more money. I was like, well, okay, maybe I'll stick around a little longer. So again, we were still having the nice parties. The midnight showing parties were still going strong for us. We had the house, we were, I guess we were probably, we weren't having parties regularly. But the toga party was, definitely put us on the map. But then we always had friends over, and we definitely went downtown Hanford, and that was a good drinking scene. There were a lot of nice old bars in downtown Hanford we would go. I remember a lot of times, we would make dinner at the house, or we would just run over to Applebee's and get the 2 for $20 special or whatever it was. And hold on just a second here, as my dog has destroyed my fan. Okay. As some of you know, that I have a giant Neapolitan Mastiff dog who I kind of let her run around while I'm recording here, and she's pretty destructive. She's a bull in a china shop, and she makes noise. If you hear something in the background, that's probably her making noise, and she's just trying to get my attention because I'm not paying any attention to her. But let's see, where did I leave off? So yeah, I'm at the Metro 4. Maybe I'm the general manager at this point. I don't know. This is also the time I started dating the green sweater girl. And we're going to call her the green sweater girl because I'm going to tell a story about it. But we'll call her Miss Green. I know in the game of Clue it's Mr. Green, but I think I've run out of female characters, so she will be Miss Green, and she's the green sweater girl. And she was a super nice girl. I was actually really into her. She was shorter than me, which is good. She did like to kind of drink and go out and have a good time, and but she was definitely a pretty staunch feminist, and again, she had daddy issues. So if I haven't mentioned it before, I am batting 100%, 1,000% on every girl that I have dated, had a girlfriend, been married to. Every single one, I would say, has had daddy issues. Now, it's funny because I wouldn't say that my sisters have daddy issues, but every single girl that I have dated, been my girlfriend, been married to, I would say 100% they have daddy issues, that their dad wasn't there, or their dad is a crazy guy, or the dad was in jail, or the dad's been to prison, and like all these things, right? And she definitely had some, so Miss Green, the green sweater girl, she definitely had some daddy issues, but she was a cool girl. I really liked her and stuff. And so so my mom might get mad at this, but all my girlfriends at some point in our relationship has straight up told me to my face, I don't think your mother likes me. So I'm batting 1,000% that all my girlfriends have had daddy issues, and all of my girlfriends have told me that I don't think your mother likes me. So it's true. Every single one. Now, the green sweater girl is a special case because the first time that I took her to meet my parents, I remember my mother basically ignored her the entire night. We went to some restaurant and my mom was like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" talking to everybody, but never even acknowledged this girl. And of course, we get back to the car and she's like, "Your mother hates me. She didn't even say hi. She didn't acknowledge me. She doesn't even know my name." I was like, "No, she's just being my mom." So, but then we had me and Miss Green. We ended up having dinner with my parents one night. And my mom is telling some stories about the good old days when they were in college, her and my dad. And she was telling this story about how they had this sofa that they got from the Salvation Army or something. And it was the ugliest green color you ever seen in your life. Oh, God, it was so horrible. This green color was so bad. Oh, and the sofa was old and was from the Salvation Army. We got it for free, but it was the only thing we could afford. And it was terrible. Just this green sofa was so terrible. And then she looks and she goes, the green sofa was about the exact same color of the sweater you're wearing, as she points to my girlfriend. And the look, I can only imagine what the look on my face was. I know what the look on my girlfriend's face was. She was trying to hold it in too. But this was another one where my mom had basically ranted for 5 minutes how terrible green color this was. And my girlfriend was wearing the exact same color. And her sweater was that color. So, of course, we get to the car and she's just like, "Your mother hates me," and just berated me the entire drive home. That's always a good fun one. Okay. So again, about this point, me and Miss Green, breaks up. She's kind of definitely, just a little, I don't know if my mom drove her off or she, we just kind of went our different ways, whatever. But this is also the point again. So I'm the general manager at the Metro 4, and I'm kind of like, I'm really starting to think like, I should really get a career, what I want to do. So, I'm talking to my parents about this, and I was like, I would, like to own my own business and all this stuff. So my dad and I, or my dad or whoever, we kind of come up with the idea of this being a tools salesman. So what ends up happening is I have a meeting, and it's with this company and the regional manager. I don't remember the guy's name, but it's with Mac Tools. So Mac Tools is a professional tool distributor. There's Mac, there's Matco, Snap-on is probably the biggest. The other one is Cornwell. And basically, you have a truck, like a box truck full of tools, and you bring the shop to your customers, which are professional mechanics. So you drive to dealerships and auto shops and collision repair shops and all these places, right? And you sell them professional tools. But the deal is that you drive to them. They don't have to drive down to Sears or to Home Depot or Lowe's or Harbor Freight to get their tools. You come to them and their professional tools, lifetime warranty, like all this stuff, right? So this is what I basically decide that I'm going to do. And my parents are on board. They're going to help me out, do all this stuff. And it's great. Totally into it. But kind of what happens is as soon as, and this is like months in the making. So, but as soon as like the Metro 4 hears about that I'm going to be leaving in a month or two or a couple months, they move into action and start looking for my replacement. So they bring in this chick. I don't remember her name, but they bring her in and, they don't tell me she's my replacement, but I'm supposed to train her, right? So I'm training her and showing her stuff, and we're working together and doing all this stuff. And it's like a month later, and then she tells me like the district manager's coming. And I was like, yeah, he told me he was coming. She goes, yeah, they're actually going to like let you go, and I was like, yeah, kind of saw this coming because, again, once they knew I was going to do Mac Tools, they definitely got in the action. Now, I was still like a month or two away from actually starting Mac Tools, but, so if you ask them at your 4, did they fire me? I don't know. I guess so. But in the end, I think it's more a little mutual because I wanted to leave anyways. It was just a little earlier than I wanted because I was going to leave in a month or two for Mac Tools. So So what happens is I'm going to start Mac Tools, and I have to go do training in Columbus, Ohio. So, and this was like, it was like middle of summer or something, like July. And I fly out to Columbus, Ohio, do Mac Tools training. And then when you get back, then you get your initial tool shipment order, and then you like fill up your truck, and then you can start your route. And you have a route, and there's like certain areas that you have to stick to. So I go out to the training. It's 2 weeks long. You stay in a hotel every night. Every day you go to the Mac Tools headquarters. And now I think about it, when I think back about it, that they did a lot of training on sales, like how to be a salesman. So if I'm all my salesman expertise, I definitely learned from Mac Tools. And they were all about, you got to sell this, and this is how you sell, and you got to do this, blah, blah, whatever. This is 2 weeks of just sales training. And I think about it back now, like they probably maybe spent like a half a day about running a business. They tell you how to like make sales in your software and reorder stuff, and here's sales, and this is what you got to do, and blah, blah, and this is how you talk to customers. But really, like running a business, they didn't really cover much of that. It's like half a day. And me, I was, I'm like 27, 28 years old. I didn't know shit about running a business. I didn't know shit about selling tools either, but I definitely learned a lot when I was there. And I remember, I think one of the examples is like, I guess one of the best advices they gave you was you have to start your own LLC. You don't want to just put it in your name. You want to have like your own separate LLC. Yes, you totally want to do that. The other part, I remember it was like when I first started Mac Tools, I'm like driving around, and I got pulled over by the Highway Patrol. And of course, the Highway Patrol, they're a bunch of assholes anyways. But he pulls me over, and he's like, hey, why I pulled you? I'm like, I have no idea, officer. Like, I got this truck. I'm pretty new at this. And he was like, well, you need, he goes like, I don't see your CA number. I think that's what it was. He goes, I don't see your CA number on the side of your vehicle here. And I was like, I don't know what that is, and he's like, starts to get mad, like he thinks I'm like playing a game or something. Like, he's like, you don't know what that is? I'm like, I don't know what that is. Your CA number. You don't know what a CA number is. And if you're listening to this right now and you don't know what it is, that's how I felt. I did not know what this guy was talking about. And then he just starts going, you don't know what a CA number is. Don't play games with me, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, this guy's like berating me on the side of the road. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what you're talking about, bro. So I think eventually he believes me, and he's like, Mac Tools didn't tell you that you would need this? I'm like, no, they did not tell me I needed a fucking CA number, So basically, it's kind of like when you drive next to like a semi truck or something, you'll see like the US dot number, or in California, you have a CA number. Basically, I had to go down to the DMV and get my truck reweighed, and then they issued me a CA number, which they didn't do in the first place when I first registered the goddamn truck. But yeah, so again, like Mac Tools, they didn't tell me any of that shit, They just taught me how to sell tools, and that's basically all I knew. Now, going back, preparing to become a Mac Tools man, this is I don't know if it's not a funny story, but it's a memorable story for me. It was definitely a good dad-son bonding moments that me and my dad, when we bought my truck, we bought a used truck from a guy in Florida. So me and my dad, this is probably like June, something like that. We had actually, we were going to fly out to Florida, buy this truck, and we were going to drive it home. So that's what we did. So, and this was the first time I actually have ever flown in an airplane. I was 20-something years old. It's the last one in my family to ever fly in an airplane. So we fly out of Fresno. We go to Las Vegas. And then we catch a flight when this is like all like red eye stuff. And then we catch a red eye from, I think Vegas went all the way to, it was Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We got off the plane and we went over and looked at this Mac Tools truck. It was kind of like a smaller box truck and stuff, but it was good. It was in good shape and everything. So we bought it, and then we drove it home. We drove from basically pretty close to where Miami is all the way to California. This was literally cross country. So we drove up through Florida. We went through Orlando, up through Central Florida. And then I remember we made it to about Tallahassee the first night. And we might have went to a Hooters for dinner or something next to a Hooters, something like. But we ate at Tallahassee, and then we kept driving. And basically, our plan was that we were just going to keep taking turns. And this Mack tool truck, this is a box truck. This is like a U-Haul truck, right? Big U-Haul truck. It like tops out like 60 miles an hour. All right? It's going to be a while. And I remember, I remember one time we stopped for gas in Florida. And we stopped at this gas station. It was straight up Deliverance movie. Now, I mean, there was a guy playing a banjo, and another guy in overalls, smoking out of a corn pipe. And I was like, this is something else here. This is straight up. This is straight up from the movie Deliverance. Even my dad was like, let's fill up and get the hell out of here. Yeah, I was like, yes, let's go. And that was in Florida somewhere. I don't remember where it was. I think it was in the Panhandle somewhere. But we basically made it to the border of Mississippi, which this is late June or early June or mid-June. It's sometime in June. Mississippi, the border of Mississippi is the most humidity I have ever felt in my entire life. That night, it was, you opened the door and that humidity slapped you across the face. It's insane. And we had just stopped at a truck stop just to sort of, get a couple, hours of sleep or whatever. And of course it's packed. And I remember some police officer or highway patrol woke us up in the middle of the night and was like, you can't park here and sleep. And we were like, all right. So I don't remember if I got up or my dad got up, someone got up, and we just kept driving. But we drove, and then we made it to basically, I believe it was Baton Rouge, Louisiana, okay? And we stopped at a Waffle House for breakfast. And I remember we got out, and I was walking in the parking lot of the Waffle, and this bug landed on me. And this was the biggest, craziest, giant mosquito, crazy bug I've ever seen in my life. Landed right on my shirt. Right on. I was like, and I like hit it away. I was like, I'd never seen a bug that big before, But I remember that we stopped at the Waffle House, and and at this Waffle House, we're basically Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and every vehicle in the parking lot is like a Dodge pickup with a bass boat on the back of it, right? These people, they just take their bass boats with them everywhere. They go to work, they go to breakfast, they got their bass boat on the back of their truck. So we stopped for breakfast, and I remember, it was a very typical southern Louisiana Waffle House, and, we ordered breakfast, and the waitress was like, oh, I can tell y'all ain't from here. We were like, yeah. We're from California. She's like, oh, California, that's where they make the movies. Can I go with you? And we were like, no, we actually don't live where they make the movies. We live in Central California. But, but I remember, so again, we took turns driving, and I remember we drove up through Louisiana. We're driving up through Louisiana, and I remember we're driving, and a lot of these highways have service roads on the side, and I think my dad was driving at the time, and I was like, what the hell are these people doing over here? And as we're going, these people are dragging this gigantic cross on this service road. And I'm like, what the hell? It's a giant cross. Then I was like, oh my God. It was like a KKK rally. They were pulling. I was like, they're going to burn that cross tonight. And there was like a bunch of skinheads, and they were like doing the salutes and stuff. It was crazy. I was like, oh my God, Louisiana. And they were just pulling this giant cross down the side of the road. And I was like, man, those guys are something else. I've never seen this stuff before. And this is one road trip across country. And then I remember we went through Dallas, and we drove through Texas, which never ended. We did stop. The first time I ever had Whataburger, we stopped in Texas, had some Whataburger. And the funny thing about Texas is you always know what town you're in, because every town you come to, there's a water tower in it, and it tells you right on the water tower what town you're in. You can never be lost in Texas, because you just find a town, and it'll be like such and such town, or, and then you're like, oh, I know where I'm at now. So that happened. And I remember at some point we drove, almost 24 hours since the border of Mississippi, and we made it to the border of Texas and New Mexico, and we found this little motel hotel thing. We stopped, and we were so dead tired that I think I jumped in and took a shower. And when I got out of the shower, my dad was snoring, sleeping. And I remember this was like the softest, like cheapest bed I ever been in, but it felt so good at the time because I was so tired. And we slept. We got a good night's sleep that time. And then basically from there, we basically just traded off and drove from the border of Texas, New Mexico through. We went through Flagstaff. We drove the 40. We probably must have went through Kingman and then into Barstow and then all the way up to Central California. And it took us basically 3 days. 3 days and some change to drive across country in this Mack Tools truck. And it was super memorable for me. I'll never forget that. And then, yeah, like really a good time that I spent with my dad, especially me being older and stuff. And after everything I had been through, that we got to kind of bond and have that good moment and everything. And some of those things that we remember and the places we've seen and the people we saw, it was crazy. So that was good. So I start Mack Tools. Again, Mack Tools was great at first. Man, I loved it. When I started, they give you a route and they tell you and they help you go with all these stuff. The regional manager rides with you because there's a lot of upset customers, and he kind of smooths it over for you, especially if there hadn't been a Mack Tool guy there for a while. And they give you all these customers. And then they basically gave me kind of what happened was they basically gave me about 4 days worth of stops, which contractually they fulfilled their contract. But it was like, we're going to give you 80 stops. That was what they were contractually obligated, but they wanted to give you 100 plus. That's like what the regional manager, because and then you had like 5 full days. Well, kind of what happened is the one guy who had the territory next to me was kind of working my territory, but they were kind of his stops, and he wanted to give them to me because he didn't want to drive that far no more, but then he ended up not giving them to me. So it was kind of like I was like really relying on that 5th day, and I had about 4.5 days of work, eventually, and that kind of stuff. So it was kind of whatever. But really kind of, I think the main thing was, this was like 2006 when I started, and it was great. The first year was awesome, making money, making deposits every week into the bank. Like, yeah, this is great. But then 2007 hits and 2008, and this is obviously the recession, the economic downturn. And if you remember, what first happened was it was the airlines and the automobile industry were the first things that kind of went, and it did. And then the housing bubble just exploded, and all the housing went crazy, like 2008, 2009. But at first it was the airline companies were like getting bailed out, and then Ford almost had to get bailed out, but then like GM, General Motors, Chevy, and GMC had to get bailed out by the government. But this really hurt mechanics. Mechanics were just scattering. No one was getting their cars fixed because everyone was worried about money. And mechanics were just trying, they were changing jobs like every 2 weeks, trying to just find a place that would keep them on or keep what their salary was before or had enough work. And it was tough because, again, your guy leaves your territory and goes to another territory. Well, he owes you money, but that you're trying to collect money, but he's also, the next territory guy is trying to sell him tools, and he's trying to collect money from a guy that's now moved into your territory. It was huge cluster. So just eventually it just kind of fizzled out, that it was just like, man, this was just super bad timing. I'm not saying that I was the best businessman or the best salesman. And again, I didn't really know much about running a business other than the little experience that I had, or when they kind of a little bit taught me. Again, they trained me more on selling tools than running a business and doing taxes and all these things, right? So it just ended up, I really did like it, but it just ended up not working out in the end. So we are at the 30-minute mark, and I think that's where we'll kind of leave off there. I think it was a good episode. Again, thank you for tuning in. This episode is exclusively on Spotify. Again, my name is Brandon Benson. Look me up, send me a comment, do whatever, and see you on the next episode of My Name is Dad.